Welcome to SAT TV News. I am Larry Larrock, your presenter. In our top stories, health officials express concern on mental health in Dominica. US contracted drug monitoring aircraft crash leaves 4 dead. IMF cuts global growth outlook but raises UK forecast. And in sports, newcomer to Windies cricket team, Sheldon Cotterell, to undergo medical examination. Details of these will follow. Welcome back. Prime Minister and Parliamentary Representative for the Vikas constituency, which includes Tibo, Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, has called on the newly sworn-in members of the Tibo Village Council to make decisions in the best interest of their community. He made the call while addressing the 18th inaugural meeting of the Tibo Village Council held on Friday, October 4th at the Tibo playing field. Prime Minister Skerrit reminded the councillors that leadership is not an easy role and requires great tolerance. He also asked the councillors to give support to the chairman to ensure the plans and programs implemented by the council are successful. The Prime Minister has also called on villagers to determine what they want for themselves while urging them to join hands to develop the village. Meanwhile, Minister for Social Services, Community Development and Gender Affairs, Honorable Gloria Shillingford, has recognized the Tibo Village Council as being one of the more established councils in Dominica. Mrs. Shillingford has asked the new council to serve as a motivation and a guide for other less experienced councils in the country. Former police officer Robert Bontiff is now the new chairman of the Tibo Village Council. Other persons elected to serve on the council are John Bruni, Mona Francois, Elena Joseph, Elder Augustine, Justina Joseph, Paul Francois, and Theodore Remy. In more news, on Monday, October 7th, the IRC, Independent Regulatory Commission, handed over 2 new licenses to Dominica's sole electricity provider, Domlec. One is the generating license and the other the transmission, distribution, and supply license for Dominica Electricity Services. Mr. Lancelot McCaskey, Chief Executive Officer of the IRC, says they recognize the fact that regardless of whether negotiations on new licenses are initiated, there are critical issues that must be addressed, which include public consultation and direct negotiations with the company.
Both licenses are for 25 years. They have a term of 25 years. It was a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation, but we arrived at 25 years. So both licenses, generation, as well as transmission, distribution, and supply. Both licenses are to commence on January 1st, 2014. There again, there was a lot of things that had to be done for that commencement date to be made a reality. But both are to commence on that day. I'll come to one of the features that that commencement date would allow. We also, in those licenses, made arrangements for the assignment or transfer of the license. That was not around before. And what we did was put in the license the procedure that must be followed by both DOMLEC and the IRC if DOMLEC needs or intends to transfer the licenses.
The generation license is non-exclusive, so competition is welcomed in the field of generation. The transmission and distribution license, however, is exclusive, making DOMLEC the sole company allowed to transmit and distribute electricity in Dominica for domestic needs.
There are two exceptions to that. One being a developer coming to develop an area where DOMLEC does not have a supply system. DOMLEC will then have to decide whether they will put in the supply system or they will say no, they can't do it. If they do say no, then the IRC could issue a license for distribution and supply in that area. And then we had to recognize the coming of geothermal and the fact that we would need to ensure that those who are charged with the responsibility of transmitting geothermal electricity from geothermal energy overseas, could be licensed by the IRC.
Within 7 days of the commencement of the licenses, DOMLEC has to inform the IRC on the process it wishes to pursue as it relates to a rate review, which must begin no later than 9 months following the commencement of the licenses. This is relevant as since the inception of the IRC in 2006, there has not been a rate review of DOMLEC. In other news, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit have announced the government's intentions to eradicate pit latrines in Dominica. The Prime Minister is also the parliamentary representative for the Vekas constituency, which includes the community of Tibo, called for a warn pit latrines at the 18th inaugural meeting of the Tibo Village Council held on Friday, October 4th at the Tibo playing field. The warn pit latrines is a continuation of government's home renovation and sanitation program. Through this program, government will make funds available for the construction of modern washroom facilities for over 20 homes in Tibo. Since the introduction of the home renovation and sanitation program, government has spent over $20 million on home renovations, directly impacting the lives of over 2,000 individuals. The program has been implemented in almost every community across Dominica, as housing is one of the key platforms of the Dominica Labour Party administration. In more news, in light of World Mental Health Day, which will be observed on Thursday, October 10th, the Ministry of Health held a press conference in an effort to highlight mental health concerns in older persons. The focus of the press conference was to recognize that mental health has a big impact on physical health of older persons.
This is indeed a growing concern. It's a growing concern because persons who have reached the age of 60 years and above are now seemingly enjoying a different quality of life than their predecessors. We realize that persons who reach the age of 60 are no longer aging gracefully or simply aging gracefully or retiring from work. They are now intent on aging successfully, which is to say they want to continue to contribute, and they are contributing meaningfully to society.
Dr. Benjamin says the mental health of a person after 60 years old can easily be disturbed. They suffer mental injuries when they are left alone, socially isolated, and at the loss of significant friends and family. The emotional life of an elderly is often disturbed when they become physically disabled. This made even worse when they suffer abuse. According to the psychiatrist, the two most common conditions that affect the elderly are depression and dementia, also known as Alzheimer's disease.
We see quite a bit at the Social Welfare Division that a number of some of the elderly who make application for public assistance, these are those who worked during the time of Provident Fund, didn't have the monies, some of them didn't have the monies transferred to the Social Security. As such today, They do not benefit from any other source.
Addressing some of the causes into the disruption of mental health of the elderly, the welfare officer stated that the realization of this fact drives individuals into a state of despair. Also contributing to the discussion, Director of the Dominica Infirmary, Mrs. Ali Matthews, said that the unwillingness by the elderly to come into the infirmary also posed as a cause for mental health disruption.
Whereas some persons really want their elderly to come to the institution, and they always say most times that they are unable to care, they are only unable to care for the person, but not for the property. And when those persons are at the infirmary, we receive calls from different solicitors to say that they're coming in to sign some documents. Sometimes children fight against children, and they come and display their behavior at the institution sometimes.
This, she says, brings the individuals into a state of depression where they refrain from eating, speaking, or being socially engaged. Dominica's population is made up of about 13 to 18% of older persons. The Ministry of Health encourages all Dominicans to join in this year's campaign to increase public awareness, social support, and family interactions that can boost the dignity of older persons so that their mental health can be protected. In other news, Kubulika, a canoe constructed in Dominica, has arrived in Guadeloupe after leaving for Les Saints on October 5th when it was officially launched in Dominica. Over 50 members of the Canoe Association of Guadeloupe traveled to Dominica for this historic event where they were accompanied by rowers from the Kalinago territory. The group comprised of volunteer rowers called Canoakis, who took turns in rowing the canoe from Dominica to its final destination in Trois-Rivières, Guadeloupe. Among the Guadeloupe delegation was a representative from the Mayor of Lamentin's office, Mr. Jose Kandasamy. Mr. Kandasamy is responsible for sports within Lamentin's Mayor's office and viewed this initiative as a starting point for strengthening sports exchanges between the towns of Portsmouth and Lamentin. Kubulika joins the original Canoe Association named Yumuliku, which was constructed in French Guiana. Over the next 2 weeks, the two canoes will sail to the communities of Petite Bouge, Saint Rose, and Lamentin in Guadeloupe. A grand ceremony is planned for the arrival of the canoes in Blachon Bay in Lamentin on October 20th, 2013. The canoes will be used to raise awareness of the historical connection with our Amerindian ancestors and the sea in linking the people along the Caribbean archipelago. In more news, President of the Dominica Cancer Society, Mrs. Kathleen Cornelius, is calling the Society's Walk for Cancer Care, which took place on Saturday, October 5th, a success. After witnessing the number of persons who turned up for the walk, they were indeed encouraged.
We had a total of at least 1,000 to 1,200 persons present at the walk. And it really serves as a form of encouragement to us at the Dominica Cancer Society, because we now know that our message is getting across. More and more Dominicans are becoming aware of the presence of cancer, and we are taking a stand in terms of providing care for persons who have been diagnosed with the disease.
The crowd included a makeup of many young girls from various secondary schools island-wide. Special recognition goes out to the students of the Convent High School, namely those of the St. Teresa House, who came out in full force as they and the society has teamed up in celebration of St. Teresa Feast expected to take place later this month.
All right, we know that breast cancer, the third leading cause of death among women in Dominica, and prostate cancer is the number one cause of death among men. We have seen a sharp increase in the number of cancer-related cases of every type, and the government of Dominica, through the Ministry of Health and Cancer Society, we are working in collaboration to see as much as possible how we could eradicate or help further educate persons about cancer prevention and their general well-being and wellness.
There was an increase of participants from an estimated 800 in 2012 to 1,200 in 2013 based on t-shirt sales and the crowd turnout. The funds generated will be released as soon as team leaders bring in their contributions so the finances can be counted. This is expected to be carried out later this week.
We really want to tell the Dominican public thank you in a special way. We were very much encouraged by the turnout. One of my friends said that she was actually moved to tears by the turnout, and we really are now aware that persons are understanding the plight of persons who have been diagnosed with the disease, and we really want to just in a special way thank the public. We could not have done it without you. You made our work a success, and we look forward to your continued collaboration in our activities for the month and in whatever activities that the Dominican Cancer Society plans.
Mrs. Cornelius is anticipating a work on a much larger scale for 2014. In more news, after a decade-long hiatus, Saturday, August 1st, 2015 has been set for the 4th edition of the Queen of the Caribbean pageant, where 40 candidates from the wider Caribbean region will contest in Dominica. The Queen of the Caribbean pageant, the largest and most prestigious event of its kind in that part of the world, began in the year 2001 as an annual event staged in Dominica and operated by the Queen of the Caribbean organization, founded and headed by Shannon Vigilant. The event is aimed at highlighting the salient defining factors of today's Caribbean woman in terms of her beauty, charm, creativity, intelligence, and talent. The pageant, however, is fashion industry driven as well. One of the objectives is to establish fashion industry benchmarks in the Caribbean and provide a much needed exposure for both fashion designers and fashionistas of the region within the global marketplace. This is an excellent opportunity for Dominica to enhance its tourism product in terms of exposure and arrivals, as well as for producers of touristic goods and services. The winner will be gratified to serve a year involving goodwill activities as well as training opportunities related to her given call. The very first Queen of the Caribbean was Miss Anne-Marie Brown of Antigua, who was crowned by the then Prime Minister of Dominica, the Honorable Pierre Charles. The current Queen of the Caribbean remains Miss Jardine Fannis of St. Lucia, when the final segment was staged in Guadeloupe in 2003. In more news, as part of Financial Information Month activities, a theme song and video have been created which lauds innovation, collaboration, and spending prudence as building blocks of economic success. The 2013 Financial Information Month theme song and accompanying video, which were produced by Chester Daddy Chess Later, the reigning soca monarch of Dominica, demonstrate a masterful integration of education and entertainment. The theme for the 12th year of observing October as FIM in the ECCU, Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, is reshaping our future starting now.
Every man, every woman, young people, join the mission. Businesses, some they call institutions together, standing tall. Low productivity, despondency, high spending habits, with no budget. Let go. Reshaping our future, we're working together, forward for the better, one collective power. Hey, join in the action, join in the motion. Yeah, man.
The theme calls for new vision, new thinking, new capabilities, and new actions to drive the economic prosperity of the people of the ECCU. This call to action is clearly reflected in the theme song titled Starting Now, which encourages persons to let go of bad habits, including inactivity, depression, low productivity, and spending without a budget, in favor of vision, collaboration, and financial discipline. And in court news, Gary Dupini of Mao River in the Kalinago territory will serve a minimum of 4 years at the Stock Farm State Prison after pleading guilty to 23 charges. Among the 23 charges included 2 theft of agricultural produce, 4 theft of livestock, intimidation, battery, threats, malicious damage, 2 charges of vagrancy, and theft of a number of items to include groceries, clothing, alcoholic beverages, a mattress, a brush cutter, an Amazon Kindle, and cash. The incidents occurred over a 5-month period between May to October 2013 in the communities of Siniku, Sensi, Gullet River, and Mao River. Some of the offenses were committed against tourists visiting the Kalinago territory. On Monday 7th October, when he appeared before Chief Magistrate Evelina Baptist, in mitigation, Dupini said he pleaded guilty because he did not want to waste the court's time. Only a few of the items were recovered, including a portion of goat meat, the brush cutter, and a cell phone. On one count of theft, with a value of items worth over $4,000, Dupini was sentenced to 18 months in prison to run consecutive, with any other sentence being served. He was also sentenced to 12 and 9 months on other theft charges, 12 months for theft of 1 charge of livestock, and 6 weeks for 1 charge of vagrancy, all to run consecutively. In addition, there was a 3-month sentence for malicious damage, 6 months for intimidation, and 6 months for threat, with all sentences to run concurrently. There were no separate penalties for battery, the other charges of theft of agricultural produce and livestock, and all the charges of theft. In more news, Mervyn Bruni, Steve Olive, and Gary Dupini of Kalinago territory have all been sentenced to 1 year in prison on a joint charge of theft. According to the police prosecutor, between the 17th and 18th of September, the defendants stole a number of grocery items and alcoholic beverages from a shop in the Kalinago territory. They all pleaded guilty during the arraignment on Monday 7th October. Some of the items stolen included 10 rolls of toilet paper, half a carton of detergent, half a carton of Guinness, and half carton of Moccasin Stout. The stolen items had an estimated value of $842. The facts presented in court stated that the shopkeeper had secured his business place on the 17th and returned on the 18th to find a padlock which secured the front door of the shop damaged. Upon entering the shop, he noticed that a number of items were missing and reported the matter to police. All 3 defendants were arrested and each admitted to the part played in committing the offense, confessing to the police that they had met and planned the incident. A number of used stolen items were recovered at the home of Bruni. All the defendants are known to the court. This has been the local segment of the news. Coming up next, regional highlights.